The requirements of 21st century learners have evolved, and educators often wonder whether old ways of teaching are enough. In our next panel discussion, titled From Stagnation to Innovation, Time for a Curriculum Overhaul, our experts will look into the need for a curriculum revamp. I would like to call on stage Jim Biggs, founder of GOB Network, Dr. Sachin Shetty, Professor, Executive Director, and Center for Secure and Intelligent Systems at Old Dominion University, Ioanna Mantzouridou, founder and CEO of Dextego, Reza Chowdhury, Professor and Chair, Department of Accounting and Finance of Mount Royal University, and Colin Boguski, founder and president of Vancouver, India Education Project. Let's welcome our panelists one more time, guys.
Hi, everyone. I kind request, since we're not a ton of people in the room, if you can all come in front, let's make it more of a conversation. Our last session, third day, so I'll give you a second to come up front. Thank you. We appreciate it. How is everyone on the panel? You guys are doing good?
Inspired.
Still got energy?
Ready to get involved. We're just getting started.
Let's go. Awesome. Thank you, guys. So to give you a little bit of context, you saw from the title, we'll talk a lot about what needs to change in curriculums, in education, but we will start with some intros, and then we'll open it up to any questions early on. We want you to feel included in the conversation and talk about the things you care to listen. So, I'll start very briefly. I was in the previous panel, so I won't bother you repeating myself. But in a nutshell, I'm super passionate about empowering underserved populations, Gen Z, solopreneurs, small to medium-sized businesses, by helping them develop soft skills, such as communication, collaboration, and leadership. And what I wanted to briefly mention about AI that we kind of touched on earlier but haven't really highlighted is that a lot of people are afraid that AI will tear us apart, which is actually what's happening today without it. AI will bring us together, because AI does not only have the ability to impact us in a very personalized way, but also can be a matchmaker, can be a broker between people and connect them based on their level of interest, of skills, industries, and backgrounds, to allow them to learn from each other and create a sense of community. So if you want to learn anything about my space, happy to connect also afterwards. Moving on to our esteemed panelists, starting with Colin. Can you give us a short intro?
Well, I think most of you were here for the last one, so I'm not really going to get too much into my business right now. But just to sort of set the tone here for what's broken, me personally, I had a great career in higher education. I worked in virtually all sectors, including K-12, in fact. So I'm one of those rare people that did sort of have that sort of 5-year span, and then I'm like, gotta move on. And I realized when I turned 50 last year that this is not where I want to be. And when I really started to peel back the layers and figure out why I got to this place, I realized it's because it was the way I was taught. And I realized that my education made me mediocre. My life was mediocre. By my terms. By many other people, they probably thought I was doing very well and very successful, but I wasn't happy. And it all goes back to my education and how I was formed, how I was taught to think, which I really wasn't. I wasn't taught to think creatively. I just went along with everyone else. I was a popular kid, did everything, played sports, great. But I couldn't think for myself. And so it took me 5 decades to figure out that I was unhappy. And it took me 5 decades to figure out my purpose. So I think that's really where I would like to start this conversation is how do we change the curriculum so kids can find out their purpose? And that's all I really got to say for the introduction.
Thank you.
So my name is Jim Biggs. I'm the founder of the GOB Network, a nonprofit educational platform. And if I could sum up in one real small sentence what our mission is, it's to teach people how to make their money work harder than they do. And that's wrapped up inside a much longer mission statement. But I think that the subject matter that we're talking about, is it time for curriculum change? In a room full of educators, if you think it's time for a curriculum change, raise your hand. So I think we have a unanimous decision. But that's the good news. The bad news is it's not going to happen from the top down. And no one is going to give you that new curriculum. It's going to be up to each and one of you to be rebellious and to fight against the machine, so to speak, and create that curriculum. Don't teach to the curriculum given to you. Teach to the curriculum you think needs to be taught. And there's going to be times when you do that you're going to have to ask for forgiveness. But we've got your back. If you come on social media, you start getting hassled by your administration, they're going to see a sea wave of people in support of changing curriculum.
Well said, Jim. So again, my name is Sachin Shetty. I'm a professor at Old Dominion University. So what I do at the university is teach courses in cybersecurity and AI, and I also do research in those topics. And so what Jim picked on is pretty relevant even in my classrooms, because in a university environment, we are so required to meet certain guidelines and accreditation requirements that it sort of forces us to follow this narrow lane. And the only way for us to get out of that, because that's not the way, and again, I routinely interact with folks in the marketplace and the type of skill set they're looking for, the traditional way of teaching, the traditional rigid way of teaching is not going to cut it, especially for a cyber AI topic. And so the way we have been able to duck the trend is I'm a big believer in learning by doing. And I'm fortunate enough that at least in the university environment, we have been given that leeway to give students their own kits so that they can learn by themselves and not be just limited by a classroom environment for learning and learning anytime, anywhere. And if you don't empower the students so they can all think and learn, again, students who come to my class, they're not your traditional students. They could be non-traditional students who have a lot of other responsibilities. And so for them, learning has to be adaptive and flexible, and to be able to empower them with again, I'll talk about that later on, what type of examples that has worked, what type of kits that have worked for them to learn and apply the knowledge that they're learning in classroom, outside classroom is really important.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon. My name is Reza Chowdhury, and I'm a professor of finance, obviously in the School of Business at the Mount Royal University in Canada. I'm from Calgary. I was in the industry for roughly 6-7 years, long back, and then I moved to academia, and almost like 22 or 3 years in academic world. I taught and did a lot of administrative tasks in Canada, in Dubai, so in different universities. Currently, I'm also the chair in the department, so I understand the importance and the need for changes in curriculum, but it's also true that there are a lot of challenges out there. It's not that easy to do it, but also we need to collectively find out some ways to do these changes. And perhaps, in the following discussions, I will share some of the thoughts and the way I see that those changes can be done. Thank you.
Awesome. So I want to share a very brief story, because I feel like when you're a change agent, you have to be inspired by something that has happened to you, or you saw, you observed, something that opened up your eyes to what can be done different. And I'm very curious to hear your stories, guys, as well. So I'm originally from Greece. And when I was 15 years old, I started coming to the US every summer for summer programs. They were either based on sustainability, business, entrepreneurship. And the very first one I did, it was at Smith College. It was 2 weeks in a school full of women and going outside, being outdoors, just playing games. And these games had tremendous impact on me because I realized that the best way to learn is doing things, experiential learning. And that's something I was never taught in Greece. We used to just learn books by heart, go do an exam and then leave and say you're a good student. So that to me was an eye-opening experience that the best way for a student to be engaged, they have to do, to act, to connect the dots on their own, but with others too. And I believe, as I mentioned earlier, AI today has a true ability to connect us and we can interact with each other online, playing peer-to-peer games, doing mentorship, and growing. So that was my moment of understanding that curriculum really sucks. So what about you guys? Can you give me an example from your industries, something that you said, okay, that is wrong, and I want to change it? Whoever wants to go first.
I'll take
Seth.
that. Yeah. So as I was mentioning in my introduction, when I teach courses like cybersecurity and AI, these are topics that if they're not tangible, they make it very difficult for students to relate to it. And so some of the things that really help us, and you probably already know this, robotics and drones are very popular type of tools and concepts, easier to understand, relate with. So what we have done at Old Dominion University is tying cybersecurity and AI with drone and robotic type of activities. So for example, a good example for cybersecurity and drone is to be able to identify what type of drone and to be able to identify what type of attacks would bring the drone down. These are very tangible type of activities. And again, these are have a lot of impacts on society as well. And there's been a lot of concerns about the privacy and security implications of drones. And so it fosters a very good, robust discussion. As a matter of fact, in my classroom, I don't necessarily have students coming from technology. Even a sociologist and psychologist part of my class. So again, I always feel cybersecurity is not a technology problem, it's a human societal problem. And for them to be able to relate the impact of attack and privacy leakage and how the impact society is more powerful, and so they're able to then connect the concept that they learn in classroom to an actual practical exercise. Same thing with robotics. There was earlier panel talking about ethics in AI, and that's where we started looking into very tactical or targeted examples of role that robots could play and what could be the ethical implications if you start empowering the robot to have human-like intelligence. What would be the implication of that? So being able to experiment that and bring in those concepts to classroom is so powerful. And the second thing that I wanted to share is, and again, this came up in the previous panel on soft skills. One of the biggest challenges with students in my class is they're very technology focused, and they have a hard time translating and articulating concepts to folks who are not cut from the same cloth, and being able to train them on not just an elevator pitch, but be able to translate the impact of the work they're doing. And to be able to speak in terms, it's all with the language, right? So all the terminologies they use, to be able to translate that well, read the room, read the person you're talking to, being able to relate that is so important, because when they go out in a marketplace, they have to convince and interact with stakeholders of different backgrounds. And so being able to, again, for cybersecurity, being not only to be able to relate to, but also to be able to communicate those hard concepts in a way that folks understand. It's very hard. It's part of art and science. And so those are things that we are emphasizing that on. We bring in guest speakers from various industries, but also being able for them to present it to them so they get immediate feedback on how do you present to a C-level person who probably only has 30 seconds of attention span. And you're trying to explain this really hard technical concept. How do you do that? And for them to have real feedback on to be more effective in their communication, it's very important, because if they don't go through the process, I've seen them present their work and their PowerPoint slide just looks like a bunch of text just inundated on it. And to be able to say more with less is very powerful. And unless they go through that whole process in a classroom or whatever education format is, they won't learn it. And so this is something that we try to emphasize more. And again, the power of communication, especially with, I'm not a big slide deck person, but to be able to communicate that, saying more with less is more impactful.
Thank you, Shetty. How about you, Reza? How is business school in need of a curriculum overhaul?
So I see it in a very different way, and I'm coming from the business world, and obviously the graduates that we prepare, we expect they're gonna will be in the business world, will be, just like us down the road. So our job is to prepare them a good manager, good leader, and good decision maker. But still I see there is some loopholes, and it doesn't fulfill the original purpose. If you look into the business curriculum, again, I'm coming from the business context, in a very undergraduate program, what we have in most of the American schools, they need to take 40 courses, starting from liberal arts to business, some core courses, and then specialized courses. These 40 courses, they have to take in 4-year window if they become a full-time student. Every semester, they have to take at least 5 courses. And if you look at a standard average semester size, it is maximum 13 to 14 weeks. Now, during this time frame, what we need to do, we have to give them some technical skills. We have to assess them. So all these 13 to 14 weeks, they're full of contents. They come to the class, they just get tons of contents. They write the exams, they pass it. By the time when they finish the 4-year degree, the only thing they come up with is the full of contents and a certificate. Do they have any kind of experience of critically analyzing or even thinking about what I'm learning? I will say no, zero. So the time when they come out, they don't have any clue that where they're gonna go and how they're gonna set their future career. They finish the accounting degree, they say, I will be an accountant. What is next? They don't know. They will go to the job market, they will try to find out what they need to do. If they don't get it, the organization sends them to the professional training. They do that, serve the purpose, and that's the way they move on the career. That does not actually serve. If you look at the whole curriculum right now, starting from high school to the, the university undergrad and even the, the master's level, these are all full of contents. Do they get the scope to apply those contents in real sense? No. We have some mechanisms, obviously, that you give the case study, they solve the problem. But again, this is a full of contents. They see the problem, they just try to apply some materials that we regularly teach them, and they finish it, they get the grade. Does it serve the purpose? No. So what we need to do actually, the work integrated learning mechanism that we should bring in the curriculum, and it's very challenging if the industry partners don't come forward and join with us to develop this kind of courses and the programs. So for example, when we say the case study, what we do basically, Harvard business case or Ivy business case, most of these schools do that. But does it really serve the purpose? No. My students, they are learning and they're gonna look for the job in Canada, in Calgary, maybe in Alberta or Toronto, Vancouver, and they are doing or solving the problem, the case study coming from the US market. There are some similarities, but the markets and industry are significantly different. My point here is, can we not engage our industry to allow our students to develop the case and then solve the case? Then they can see from A to Z. And this process is not there. We have co-op, we have internship, these are some sort of work integrated learning, but that is not for the majority of the students. Only 5 to 10% of students get that chance. Now the point here is that how we're gonna engage, another important thing I will say, that when we talk about the curriculum revision, I think the curriculum revision should happen from high school, university, and even the professional development or the, the certification program. I'm very frustrated these days that, yes, in business program, we need to accredit our, program with a professional designation and stuff like that. That helps a student to get into the process very smoothly. Do they ever talk with us university professors when they set their professional requirement? No. Do we usually talk with the professional accrediting bodies to set our curriculum when we are developing the course? Very minimal. Are we sitting with the industry people, or the industry people coming to us, or even the continuing education or the professional programs? Are they, taking us to develop this curriculum? Do we have any clue what our students who are coming from the high school, what they learn in the high school? No. So there is a huge gap in the whole education system, and unless the higher school educators, university educators, industry, and the professional accrediting bodies, we sit on the same table and set our curriculum together. We openly discuss what we need to subtract, what we can leave with artificial intelligence to give them, in the extra hour. I don't think so this revolution will happen. So this is a long process, and we need to bring those things on the discussion at the table. So I will stop here and move on the later on.
Let's go, Colin.
Yeah, if I can build on that, amazing points. 100% agree. And, looking back at, my experience again, purpose. I was never given an opportunity to explore myself. It all goes back to content. We're focusing so much on content, right, that we forget about the individual. And even if we, try and build skills with individuals, we're still forgetting about the purpose. How are we giving them opportunities to explore themselves when we're so focused on content and ticking off boxes on our learning objectives that the school district requires of us? So how do we find our purpose? I mean, when I look back at my 16 years of education, and I think back, well, what did I learn and how did I learn it? I can't tell you anything that I learned in school that I'm using now. Everything that I've learned has been from sports teams, has been from associations, organizations, clubs. So why is that? Well, it's because we're focusing on content. We're not focusing on the individual and who they are and helping them figure out, what is my passion? What is my purpose? So I think that that's a fundamental place for us to begin looking at, well, what are the little pieces we want to fix? So how do we help a student find their purpose? Do we teach them to communicate with other people, engage with other people, collaborate with other people? How do we get that 2% of creative geniuses up to 100% creative geniuses as adults? And where do we go wrong with that? So that's really looking back for me personally, I'm like, where do I see deficiencies? We forget about the person. We forget about the individual. And we're so focused on metrics or proving that my school is better than your school and our school district is better than your school district, so I'm going to get more money because we're doing the right thing. Or it's all wrong because we forget about you and you and you and you. We forget about the individual. So I think that is the sea change that we need to see happen, is forget about the administrative model that makes it easy to allot money for this or for that. Forget about that. Let's start with the individual and start, how do we create these fascinating individuals? These individuals who see their purpose and step out and engage other people and share that passion, share that purpose, instead of just walking around like lemmings. Right? We're all just following people. So, not you. I mean, I think in this room, we are the leaders. We are the ones who've taken the action to step forward and say, I want to learn more. I want to grow. I want to do better. So we are not the issue. The issue is the people who never came to this conference, the people who never took that chance to learn, how do we make change happen? So that's what we're all doing. So congratulations to everyone here, because we are the change makers. But the next step is, how do we actually make it happen?
Thank you. Jim, you come with a very different perspective of also non-for-profits. So tell us, what do you think has to change? Where do we start?
So, like Colin said, this room is not the issue, but this room is the solution. And I think that, we were talking earlier at lunch, the one thing that our educational system does better than anything else, the one thing that we excel at, is killing dreams in children. And we don't do it purposely. We're given an agenda that teaches that. We've given an agenda that teaches to a 100-year-old paradigm that we don't live in anymore. And it's a huge challenge for us to try to figure out how to overcome that. But I shared with some of the panelists earlier today that I was a very poor reader, even in 6th grade. I was probably reading at a 3rd grade level if I was lucky. But I had someone take interest in me and started offering me different opportunities, different books to read, and took me out of class and put me in the library and told me just find anything I wanted to find. Look at anything you want to look at. And that was an inspirational spark for me. But what I found, what they gave me that actually turned it on was a comic book. And I related to the heroes. I related to the villains. I related to the color. I related to how simple it was. It was just a little bubble with 2 words or, 3 words. But that ignited an interest in reading for me that's lasted a lifetime. And most of my learning, to what Colin said, did not come from school. It came from my own pursuits. And I think that's probably true even of the most educated among us. People that have an MBA, a PhD, they probably would admit that they've learned more on their own through interaction with, whether it's a reading material or another colleague or self-study. They've learned more that way. And we have to make sure that we're trying not to allow ourselves to kill those dreams in the children. I think that's where we need to go, because we know that if we can teach them how to be interested, if we can teach them how not to stop dreaming and help them turn a dream into a smart goal, and then help them turn a smart goal into a daily activity. If we can do those things, then we can change the curriculum.
Thank you so much. I love everything you said. I believe a fundamental problem with the current educational system is the fact that we make people feel shame when they fail. You fail a class, you feel like there's no opportunities out there for you. You fail at work, that means you're gonna be fired. Like, there's this fear that keeps staying inside of us that is blocking our development. If our whole aim as human creatures is to reach our full potential, how will we ever get there with that fear? So, for instance, the way we created Dextego was that no one gets graded. Dextego works with scenario-based challenges according to one's role or industry, or for instance, in your case as educators, you can say, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, and a challenge could be, you have these students complaining about the assignment, they cannot agree on this project, how would you handle it? And now you can reply through video or text, so the AI coach can see your facial expressions, your tone, pitch, content of what you're saying, and it helps you by meeting you where you are, amplifying your level of soft skills, and giving you a different perspective. And that's what education should be, us helping each other become a full person by understanding how others think, and not just thinking, okay, I'm an introvert, which means my only option is working with a computer, so I'll go to engineering. And to conclude, my point is that with fear, you'll never be a change agent. With fear, you'll never find that mentor who believes in you, because that means that you put yourself out there. And as a professor, as a mentor, people have a tremendous impact on others, so we should feel that responsibility deep in our hearts and try to make a difference and make the world a better place. So at that point, I don't know if you want to add anything on this or open it up to questions.
Can I just contradict that point,
Yes.
actually? I feel that as a Gen Xer, after I graduated, the following generations are treated too softly. This idea of participation medals for everyone creates mediocrity. I do, however, believe in safe spaces, safe learning spaces. For me, failure has been the best teacher. I encourage failure. I encourage people to have the students to have the courage to try something new. That's growth. And you're going to learn a lot more when you fail than if you just kind of skate by and think you got it. But when you fail, you know you didn't get it, and then you know what not to do next time. So I encourage failure, but I do encourage failure in a safe space where students don't feel less than when they do fail, that they see that as a growth opportunity, and in fact, that is better than just skating by and thinking I might have it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Reza.
So I have just a couple of points here, and you mentioned about the mentorship concept, and I can quickly share some my experiences. When the students come, say for example in our accounting program, and if you ask them that why you are studying accounting, still they are telling me that, yeah, my dad said that accounting is good and there's a lot of jobs, good salary, and that's why I'm studying accounting. That does not actually reflect who the person is, correct? And artificial intelligence can play an important role there, like I believe, like, you know, we are in 21st century, the kids are very much, trained and they love to deal with the technology. So that mentorship, like developing something where these young minds can interact with that technology or intelligent software and try to understand who the person is. Is he good as an accountant, or is he good as a marketing or salesperson? I think the artificial intelligence can play an important role. I'm assuming some of you know the ChatGPT. There was a lot of arguments going on that is it substituting the the higher education, because folks can use it in a wrong way, can use it as a cheating tool rather than knowledge-based tool. But we also need to think about that how we can assess students by sharing ChatGPT to them and tell them you criticize the ChatGPT so that it's gonna open up their concept of critical thinking. I also feel that who are the educators, they also need to understand that at what level they should educate the students, right? I talked about the contents, and there is a obviously rationale behind it, that when I went to the university long back, I didn't learn cryptocurrency, I didn't learn fintech. These are all new developments, and knowledge will revolve. It will never stop. New things will come which we are not aware of right now. And that's why what we are doing, we are just, pushing all these new contents in that 13-week block. So students are losing their interest because they have a lot, but artificial intelligence can play an important role there. Some of the contents, they can inbuilt in the artificial content side, and we in the higher education, we can refer those sites so the students can go and learn from there. Again, if we don't work collectively, I don't think so this revolution is possible. So I'm looking forward to industry participation to change this post-secondary education.
Just to add something very briefly here, I had a lot of arguments with professors about whether or not they should say, don't use ChatGPT in my classroom in their curriculums. And my approach is always that if your assignment can be cheated by ChatGPT, you should rethink the assignment. That means you're not allowing actual critical thinking, to your point, to be examined. You're just examining what the book says or online. So think about how to empower your students, because at the end of the day, they will use ChatGPT at their work a couple of years down the road. So you don't want to just put a barrier that they will then have to face. You're the one that's supposed to open up the doors, not close them.
Just to give a specific example on failure, right? So I teach cybersecurity, so what I always encourage is I create this ethical hacking labs. And so what happens is students are, when they first come to my class, they're always fearful. They feel like, because I always tell them the first day of class, you're not getting out of this class until you demonstrate that you have successfully written a successful malicious software. And you show me. And when I say that, I let them know that you're going to be fearless, because you're not going to get it right the first time. And I give the example of a hacker. You always see in the news about the hacker being successful, but what you don't hear about is that 1 million attempts that a hacker did. So nobody's going to talk about that. But all those lessons that we'll learn, again, I'm not encouraging hacking, but if you don't know why the system breaks, you don't know how to fix it, right? So I always let my students know that you're not going to have a perfect system. You just got to know the flaws in those systems. And I tell them that I don't know all the flaws. You may discover something through your fearlessness, even though it may not take you to the end game, but you learn a lot in the process. And that's a lot of discovery you're going to make. And I want you to be fearless while you do so. So we created this ethical hacking where they had to be fearless, and I got support from the university where they can, fearlessly, and not, being able to get into trouble by anybody, right? So being fearless is so important. Again, that fearlessness attitude really opened their mind, right? So they know that it's almost like there's no one way to compromise. There are many ways to get there. And so the ability, the fearlessness, and just opening up their horizon in terms of all different ways to do that, that's really open. Every time I teach this class, I have a student who comes up with another new way of doing things, which I didn't know about it. And so that not only helps me learn, and again, students are so creative when you open their mind and tell them that it's okay to fail because you're going to learn so much. And again, if you don't do it, you won't understand what's another way of not doing things right.
So I'm really going to date myself here, trying to use the cool kid language. Oh my God. OMG. That's about 10 years, maybe 20 years too late. But if we want to really impart a life skill, let's teach kids to embrace failure. Let's make failure something that they strive for, because they'll never get to accomplishment without it. But we don't celebrate failure. We celebrate the A, not the F. And we allow those students to slowly get lost and to start to move to the back of the classroom. And I say, don't allow the student to sit in the same place twice. Make them make new friends. Make them get to the front of the class so that my attention is on them. But more than anything, how can we get them comfortable failing? And so I think that didn't come up in our earlier practice chats, but oh my God, that is a phenomenal point. So thank you.
Thank you, and I'll open up the questions in just 1 second. Just want to also say, and of course not for you guys, but for other educators out there, that the curriculum shouldn't just change for the students, but for the teachers as well. When teachers and professors are being taught how to teach, they need to also learn everything we're talking about now. They need to be very in tune with what's happening in the world when it comes to education, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to all sorts of other news. It's not something that you learn once and you don't adapt and you are not flexible, because every new class you're having is a new experience. Every group of students that comes in has their own background, their own traumas, their own imagination, and so you have to be super flexible and keep learning as your students learn with you as well.
The topic of this session was, does curriculum need an overhaul? I think we all realize that. I mean, in a perfect world, wouldn't that be really cool if instead of like social studies and phys ed and science, what if we had resilience, empathy, collaboration, creativity? What if we turned things on its head, and instead of looking at subjects and content, what if we looked at competencies and looked at content within that competency, in the context of that competency? It's a bit of a pipe dream, but it's not going to happen. We're not going to turn the curriculum on its head. But I do think incremental change is required, necessary, and very doable. So that's sort of my final statement here.
They're going to have to learn those skills sooner or later. Either we're going to teach it to them or life's going to teach it to them. So the earlier they learn that, the more successful they'll be in life.
Any last thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned that in my space, the topics that we are teaching, what I'd like to emphasize more on is not so much about teaching technology that's in the vogue right now, but being able to teach skills that would stand the test of time, because it's hard for me to predict what would be the job for it. You know, if I were to, some of my students are 18 to 20-year-old, to tell them that by the time they're 40, what would be the job or career that will still be in vogue? I don't know the answer to that. But what we can at least emphasize is some of those time-tested skills that we've been talking about. It could be soft skills. It's about embracing failure and skills that will always stand the test of time, whether it's cybersecurity, AI, whatever the next technology is going to sweep the nation, sweep the world. Being able to understand those skills, which I don't think has ever left beyond me 23 years since I've been in this business. And I think to be able to impart those, which I think would still, I still hope, will stand the test of time, and our ability as educators to do so, so that we're not always chasing the latest technology, the latest certification all the time, which again, I talked about in my introduction, that that's something that our rigid education constructs really force us to do so. But to be able to impart skills that are not always chasing the next tech gizmo, and to be able to impart skills that will stand the test of time, it's going to be something that will always be critical.
So my last few words, I will repeat the same thing. I think time has come that universities, high schools, and the industry, we all sit down and, create the actual needs for the next generation of kids. And I will say just one example that what we, see every time. Like, if you asked our current undergraduate students to write a project report, they ask us to give a rubric. They don't forget about critical thinking. They are becoming, the graduates who are coming in the job market in coming years, that they don't have even that skill set that how to prepare a project report unless the teacher gives them the rubric that you have to start from introduction, you have to do this, you have to do that. So, certain extent, they are also becoming a bunch of robots that if you don't give them something, they cannot produce something. So that skill set should be developed from the high school level. And that soft skill is required. And unless we try to do that, we try to give them a sense that each profession, how it looks like, and whether he's the right person for that right profession, I think we are damaging their future career, and this world will not get the real graduates that we are looking for. Business world is becoming challenging. We all know that. Their needs are also challenging. And we as university educators cannot do it alone as a standalone, providers. So everybody's participation is, urgently required. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see if anyone has any question or takeaway, something you guys want to share. Feel free to come in the mic.
So I have a lot to ask and say, but I'll try to make it brief. We've talked a lot over the last 3 days about the individual student and the individual needs and tailoring to the individual student, and I think that's extraordinarily important. I work one-to-one with students, so that's what I'm about. But what I'm really wondering is, shouldn't we be talking about how students interact with each other and how we get along with each other? Because ultimately, if I can't get along with you, I also can't work with you. And if I can't be kind to you, you don't want to work for me. So in business and in education and in all walks of life, getting along and cooperating with each other seems to me to be the fundamental thing that we need to learn how to do, especially in a world that's so torn apart by disagreement and distress, right? Well, humanity, this is what we do. So I'm wondering, first of all, do we need a centralized curriculum that says what everybody on planet Earth needs to learn? And I don't believe we do. I think that if where you live, your local area, your community needs to be the ones that decide what we need to learn. And this is a very tricky topic because we don't all agree on what things we should or should not learn, what children should know about, what children shouldn't get to know about. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how did you develop the curriculum? How do you know what the content is? And without making a top-down judgment that everyone should learn the same thing, which is what standardized learning is about. And I'm gonna hush now.
Go ahead, Reza.
So if I get a chance to answer that question, human interaction is must. COVID came, we introduced online teaching, but after COVID we realized that, hybrid is okay, but online, 100% online teaching does not work. Students still prefer a human being, a professor standing in front of the class and talk with them and hear them. So there is no question about that. But the point that I'm trying to highlight here, say for example, the hot topics these days, obviously equity, diversity, inclusion, corporate social responsibility, ethics, and all these things. We teach them. They know all the contents. They know what are those. Where is the application? Can we show that application? No. Because if you say CSR, I'm sure all our kids know what CSR means, but they don't get a chance to apply that. How are we going to solve this, Ken? In this context, I want industry participation. If industry gives us some room to engage our students to do that CSR thing, the community service, by joining in such projects, which I can bring as an assessment tool in my CSR course, and that's way I can ensure the contents and application at the same token. So this is an example of industry engagement. Usually I don't see that. Industry usually means they give a bunch of dollars for scholarship and awards. But I think, that's the traditional tools, but that tools can be revised and, brought it more application way. The way I see AI, say for example, we have, even after, say for example, finishing the undergraduate program, they go for post-baccalaureate or one-year certification program. There are a bunch of books out there. Do you think that we have enough time to read all these books from page number 1 to page 117? If somebody says that, I will not believe it. We are in a different era. We don't have time to go through all these contests. If we conduct 3-day seminar or conference, do you think you learn everything what you need to learn? Not necessarily. AI can play an important role there to give as a lifelong tool, so whenever they need it, they can go and also, interact through gamification or simulation or somebody in the virtual world to learn on a continuous basis. This kind of revolution I refer, and this can be done. Thanks.
I 100% agree, and I want to add 2 words, self-awareness and accelerated learning. So we all agree here how important soft skills are, but to your point about if I don't know if I like you, I don't know if I can work with you, self-awareness is key across all stakeholders in education. So if there's one thing that's a must in a curriculum for me is teaching people to become self-aware, understanding what their passions and purpose is, what their interest is, and allowing them to customize their own learning journey. You cannot say that's it for everyone because, of course, you have tradition, countries have different priorities, values, importance of education level is different. So I think allowing that customization is key. And also, we can't spend our entire life in a classroom because that's not where the real learning happens, as we all shared. So accelerated learning, minimizing the years in your regular teaching facility and having people do experiential learning, mentorship, talking with others, learning from others, working diverse jobs and environments will allow them to understand what they care about.
And going back to what you're saying about working with other people, I think that for me, the easiest answer that can be applied anywhere at any level of education is project-based learning. Through project-based learning, you have a purpose, you have a finite period of time, you have roles to play, there's different stages in that project, and isn't life just a project? I mean, isn't what you do at work most of the time a project, whether it's a campaign or a class, that's a project. And so we live in a world of projects, but we don't do enough of it. When we do project-based learning, that's like a team winning a game. You're working together. You're bringing your individuality and your skills, combining them with the other people in your group. So you're learning about other people, you're learning about your strengths and your weaknesses in comparison to other people. And so that's that socialization that can happen anywhere. And so I strongly believe that project-based learning is the answer. That's something that I think we can implement immediately, which is why, self-plug, pblplans.com, when it's live, is going to be that answer. You're going to be able to change the world in seconds. You're going to be able to plug in the information for your class, saying, I'm from USA, I'm teaching grade 2, I'm teaching social studies, and I want to throw on sustainability number 16. That's easy for a teacher. The AI is going to create that lesson plan for them. It's step by step. You can say, I want this project to be 1 hour long, I want it to be 1 month long. Whatever that is, fully catered to your situation in your school, in your classroom, and the students in your class. So that's, for me, an easy answer, an easy starting place to start to implement projects.
Thank you. Let's hear last question. Maybe Jim and Shetty can answer it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think everyone in here would agree that the education system is broken at its core. And what I'm hearing from you guys is mostly you're touching on the symptoms of that core, not quite getting to what I think is the core. So, and I could be wrong, but I think you alluded to it with a 100-year-old basis. It's actually, I think it's hundreds of years. And I could be very wrong about this, but the old apprentice, mentor-apprentice is the basis of the education system. So you have somebody super smart, they're like maybe not super smart, but with a skill, like blacksmithing or sword making or something. So then a bunch of people want to learn it. So they set up a system where a lot of people would apply. So they needed people to be washed out, which created the grading system. And to your point, failure. But to your point that, sorry, I didn't catch people's names and it's not presented well. That there has to be a curriculum level for passing. So more of a pass-fail versus, fail and you're done and you're out. It's kind of the social message that we had, certainly when I was in school. And I was very disturbed to find when I got to college that it's the same stuff. The other feature of that was it comes up with it's focused on teaching instead of on learning. So this master who is teaching the apprentice, they have what they know and they're trying to teach it, and the apprentices who can see it the same way that they're teaching it, they're learning it, and everybody else, it's in science, it's throughput. You need to measure how much was said versus how much was actually retained and learned. And I'm sure you guys would have some other suggestions in that, but that was definitely in. Also to your point about not learning. Not only does the school system not teach you how to think, it teaches you not to think. So I would let you guys.
Yeah, so I would love to carry on the conversation for 2 or 3 more hours, but we have run out of time. And I know that they're on the schedule, still a networking session to be had this afternoon. So I would absolutely love to continue the conversation if you guys are open to staying a little bit longer before you catch your flights home, and meet us in the networking room. And I'll let Sachin finish up.
Measuring
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, so much.
See you at the networking.